We begin on a Monday with an extraordinarily disturbing story that only gets worse and worse as you begin to peel back the layers of the putrid onion. But there's a reason we're beginning here, and it's not just for shock value, and I'll explain in a minute. But first, the New York Times reports this. An 83-year-old Brooklyn woman convicted twice of killing women she lived with was charged with murder on Thursday after investigators found a head in her apartment that officials said belonged to a body discovered in a shopping cart last week. The police first discovered pieces of the victim, Miss Leiden's remains, in the early hours of March 3rd, when a 911 caller reported that they had found body parts in a shopping cart outside of a pawn shop at the corner of Atlantic and Pennsylvania Avenues in Brooklyn. Police officers arrived to find a woman's torso inside a multicolored bag with a flower decal. And they also, by the way, discovered the killer was rolling around a grocery store in one of those carts, and was sitting on top, apparently, of the severed leg of the victim. Now, that's where we're beginning. And I said it only gets worse the deeper you go. So, you're in for a bumpy ride with this as the starting point. It turns out that the suspect, last name Marcelin, is an actual serial killer, having been twice convicted already of murdering two other women that we know of on two separate occasions. So the Times continues, Miss Marcelin has served decades in state prison in connection with two Manhattan homicides in 1963 and 1984. In October 1963, she was convicted of first-degree murder for fatally shooting her then-girlfriend in a Harlem apartment building. The state court judge overseeing the case imposed a life sentence after the jury was unable to decide whether to impose the death penalty. Court filings show in May 1984, Miss Marcelin was released from prison on lifetime parole, according to state records. Less than a year later, after her body was found in a bag near Central Park, Manhattan prosecutors said Miss Marcelin had stabbed to death another woman that she had been living with. In 1986, she pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter, was sentenced to 6 to 12 years in prison, state records show. Because of her parole status, that sentence was added to the original life term. Over the next 3 decades, she repeatedly sought release on parole and was denied. In a 1997 appearance before the state parole board, Miss Marcelin described the 1984 crime and said she had problems with women. In 2010, the state denied another bid for parole, saying your release at this time is incompatible with the welfare and safety of the community. But then she was released on parole in 2019, records show. Okay, so Marcelin killed a woman, first-degree murder, sentenced to life in prison, but was released after 20 years. Marcelin kills another woman, is sentenced to prison, added on to the original life sentence, is released again, even though the parole board had previously said that it would be unsafe for society if we release you. They released him anyway. And then the killer proceeds to kill and dismember a third victim that we know of. So apparently, big shocker here, a serial killer does not magically become less dangerous and less deranged after sitting in a cage for a few decades. There does not arrive a point where you can say, well, this deranged lunatic psychopath killer has been stewing in solitary confinement for 18 years. I'm sure they're normal now, right? That doesn't happen. It doesn't work that way. And yet the killer was released again to kill again. But we're missing one detail here. So you've probably already maybe noted something. You thought probably, well, a female serial killer? That's unusual. It's not unheard of, but it's unusual. You don't hear very many of those. And a female serial killer who targets women. Now that probably is unheard of. But then the New York Times offers this detail. Miss Marcelin, who was listed as male in earlier court records, but now identifies as a woman, according to a law enforcement official, was indicted on second-degree murder charges on Thursday in the death of Susan Leiden, accused of dismembering her and hiding her body parts. Okay, so this demented psychopath who dismembers women also happens to have a fetish where he likes to pretend to be a woman. And the New York Times, not to mention the cops, the court system, everybody, they're all making sure to respect this lunatic's delusional fetish and even participate in it. This is some straight up Buffalo Bill, Silence of the Lambs stuff, where this guy likes to kill women and essentially assume their identity. It should be very clear to any rational person that his, quote, gender identity in this case is all part and parcel with the whole psychopathic routine. And even if it isn't, I mean, even if his masquerading as a woman has nothing to do with his murder of women, even if he developed these two quirks independently, Still, why should we care to respect his pronouns? The whole argument for respecting someone's pronouns is that we don't want to hurt their feelings. And I think that's a bad argument in general. But for a serial killer, we're actually worried about hurting his feelings? Now, this is one example, an extreme example, but also not unprecedented, of a problem that permeates our society, which is that we don't tell people no. We're not allowed to say no anymore. Nobody says no. We're so allergic to no that we won't even say it to a damn serial killer who asks us to affirm his alleged gender identity. A gender identity that it just so happens will presumably mean that this killer of women will now be put in a women's prison. Again, any reasonable person can see that this is almost certainly why he is calling himself a woman, so that he could be housed with women, his prey of choice. And rather than saying, no, we're not doing that, you're going to a male prison, you freaking lunatic, instead the court system will say, well, okay, we respect that. I mean, we don't approve of other things you've done, but we'll respect you here. They won't tell him no. The parole board wouldn't tell him no. The parole board told him, you're dangerous to society, but okay, you can go. Now the media won't tell him no. The police won't tell him no. The prison system won't tell him no. This guy should get a no delivered to him by a firing squad, but he won't get that either. Nobody wants to say no. And we see this problem all over society, not just with transgender serial killers. On Friday, we played a clip of a morbidly obese plus-size model, Tess Holliday, model in quotes there. I put model in quotes the same way we got to put woman in quotes when talking about the serial killer. But this plus-sized quote-unquote model who, though clearly weighing somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 pounds, claims to be anorexic and attends weekly therapy sessions with a counselor who affirms that perception. She apparently thinks that when she's chowing down, the 2 seconds between bites count as deprivation and starvation. Like, I'm anorexic because I'm not literally eating literally every second of the day. That's what she thinks, and she's affirmed in that view. She's told yes. She goes to a dietitian once a week. Her dietitian should be, telling her to go on a diet, but diets mean less food, and that means telling her no, and you can't do that. Everywhere you look, you see people who have never been told no. You see the plump fruit of our culture's refusal to say no, our obsession with affirmation. Every person you see walking around with purple hair and a million piercings, demanding to be referred to as they or Zer or Zeus or whatever, is yet another testament to our unfortunate habit of affirming everyone in everything all the time. Speaking of people who should be told no, I'm currently in Atlanta preparing to speak at Georgia Tech tonight in the lead up to the women's swimming championships where biological male Leah Thomas will compete. Now I'll be talking, among other things, about the beauty and value of the word no. Now Leah Thomas is obviously not a serial killer, but he benefits from the extreme ideologically fueled permissiveness in our culture. And the primary victims of that relentless affirmation happen to also be women. I'll be speaking up in protest of his participation and also to explain why it's wrong and to make some points that go beyond sports, because this isn't about sports fundamentally. This is really about truth and about learning to say no. No to the nonsense, because we all know that it is nonsense. Even most of them on the left know that it's nonsense. And yet we're supposed to cooperate with it anyway. We're supposed to abandon all at once the fundamental truths that all of us know and have always known. And we're supposed to do it for no other reason than the fact that it will hurt Leah Thomas's feelings if we don't. And of course, his feelings are the only feelings that matter. His feelings and the feelings of other trans people. I guess I should clarify. I say we don't tell people no anymore. It's only certain people we don't say no to. If you belong to certain categories, you don't get the no. Now, the other women on his team, they get a no. Because his feelings, for some reason, are supposed to outweigh the feelings of women who don't want their sports destroyed, who don't want their privacy invaded, who don't want their very identities appropriated and stolen and cheapened and turned into a costume. The feelings of a million women are dust when stacked up against the feelings of one gender-confused man. All of reality is dust The truth is dust. Biology, everything, all of it is to be discarded for one trans person's feelings. Well, I think the answer to that should be no. I urge everyone to say no. Don't affirm what you know are lies. Don't cooperate with what you know is wrong. Don't abandon what you know is true. Don't pretend to believe what you don't believe. It takes some courage to say no in this world. It's a word that's not said nearly enough. A word that a guy like Leah Thomas has probably never heard in his life. But he needs to hear it. All of the gender ideologues need to hear it. All of the liars and frauds trying to push and coerce and shame us into surrendering our common sense in so many areas of life. All of the cry bullies using emotional blackmail because they have no arguments. Everyone demanding that we pretend to believe what we don't believe. Pretend what is true, what is not true. All of them everywhere need to hear it. No. That's the word. Well, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Matt Walsh Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.